Hello, it's so great to see everyone here. I'm going to kick this off first. I know we have a number of students in the audience and a number of students online, so I wanted to start, and maybe I'm filtering a little bit here around transition because I have a daughter who's graduating law school this weekend, so I'm thinking a lot about what kids at school are thinking. Number one, you don't have to know what you need to be when you grow up. I remember in college all the pressure around feeling that, like, oh my God, I need to know. You don't need to know. What you need to know is what are you good at and what's the value that you can offer. Who are you? It took me maybe 20 years doing this before I figured out I was a builder. Once I knew I was a builder, then I know how I can add value to a company. And I bring that up because as we think about transition, this job, Chief Innovation Officer for Aon, didn't even exist. No, nothing even sort of like it existed when I was at university. The job I had before this was leading digital economy for Aon, also didn't exist. And so I think what's important to know as a student is it's okay to not know what you want to be. Just be good at what you do, and you'll be just fine. So, all right, we'll get to the good stuff. I want to talk to you about how I got here, because I think that will inform the way that we're talking about innovation when it comes to business. So about 6 or 7 years ago, there's a company called Uber, and Uber was in the United States and needed to expand globally. I started working with Uber. They were a teeny tiny client for Aon at the time, and we realized the opportunity that Aon could bring and the value that we could offer to a company that, when they were going into new countries, the country would say, we don't know if it's legal, we don't really understand rideshare, we have an entrenched taxi business, we have insurance companies that don't understand the business model. We had to figure it out. Long story short, when everything's said and done, I've been to more than 40 countries around the world with Uber, creating their insurance programs, flying in and spending 2 weeks in every country, sometimes longer, figuring out how to get it done. Why is that important? Who cares about the insurance program? The reason it's important is because they can't operate if this isn't there. This facilitates their business. And so in a time of transition, when we were going from everyone driving their own car or taking a taxi or the train to, I'll bet almost everyone in this room has taken some kind of a ride share or ride hail somewhere, during that time of transition, we had to innovate how to get this done. And it wasn't a cookie-cutter solution because every time we go into a new geography, the new geography would say, well, actually, this is highly regulated, this thing about driving a car. And you've got a person over here and a vehicle over there, and you've got a business and a third party, and then you've got a consumer, and we care about all of them. So we need some help. So innovation looks differently in so many different places. Since then, we built a practice around that at Aon, and we've built programs that helped facilitate business. We've built them for Uber. We've built them for Airbnb. Many of you have probably used Just Eat Takeaway. We've built them for Just Eat Takeaway. We've built them for autonomous vehicles. And so when we think about innovation, sometimes innovation does look like the iPhone that's probably in many of your pockets. It's usually in mine. They made me get rid of it. It makes me feel a little nervous to be up here without my phone. But we're used to product innovation. What I want you to start thinking about is, how do we do business innovation so that when businesses start innovating, we can also help facilitate that through our own solutions. And at Aon, for us, that's insurance and brokerage. The world is becoming increasingly volatile, and the uncertainty that all of our CEOs are facing, it's in the news every single day. And so that provides us with an opportunity to think differently about how we serve them and the role that we play in the new world. I look at it as, what are the macroeconomic trends that businesses are facing for which my industry isn't quite meeting? And so we're used to thinking about, and in fact, we ask our clients regularly, what are your top 5 risk issues? I tell you, clients are going to tell us, it's cyber insurance, my property. They kind of tell us what they're thinking about. What is really happening for them is climate change, new mobility issues, intangible assets. These global economic trends that are happening for which industries are completely transforming, and we need a new way of thinking about it. So think about like even changes in commerce. So it's what we're consuming and it's how we're consuming it. So some of us have had a lot of change in the last couple of years. We went from working in the office to all of a sudden being at home, and that upset the entire way that we interacted with commerce. And so according to eMarketer in 2021, e-commerce retail sales reached $5 trillion worldwide and expected to go to $7 trillion in the next couple of years. Just unbelievable. The other piece that happened is there's hyper-personalization occurring. So now whether it's influencer marketing, it used to be television ads and things like that. That still happens. But what's really happening is you see influencers, and it's customized content based on how you've interacted with the internet prior. So your Instagram feed, your Facebook feed, even what Google gives you, looks different than what they give me based on what you looked at previously. So now we're getting this hyper-personalized content. There's benefits to that, there's drawbacks to that. The other thing that's happened is we've got this new convergence around how we pay for things. So in some ways you can think about whether it's apps or even super apps that we're using to pay for things, but now we have all new currencies. And we have new places to spend those currencies in the metaverse. So a lot of innovation's happening, and we might not always be keeping up with that. When I think about this, I think there's so much happening in the technology world, and it both creates opportunities, it also creates a lot of transparency, also creates risk and disparity. Cybercrime damage in 2021 amounts to $16.4 billion a day. Can you imagine? So today, $16.4 billion in cybercrime damage. So there's a lot happening on the risk side as we move to this highly technical and unique world. We also have a change in workforce. So we're seeing the workforce transition. So I love this new term. So I keep hearing about the Great Recession or the the Great Resignation. And it's really the Great Reassessment. We've all understood now what is most important to us, right? I take myself, I've got 5 children at home. I used to travel 10 to 12 days out of every 2 weeks for years, did that. Then all of a sudden I was home. I care a lot more about leaving now. I've kind of gotten an understanding of what the value of being home with that family and those kids are, and also what I can do on the internet or through the web. And so now we have smart working, right? We're redefining the value of face-to-face interaction, of mentoring. What does that look like? Onboarding. What constitutes a work week? Is it 4 days? Is it 9 to 5? Is it half a day every day? It could be almost anything. We also have climate change. Arguably the biggest risk that everyone on the planet is facing. It's something that hits every single one of us. And if you're looking at climate goals, we're trying to reduce the change to 1.5 Celsius in change. In order to just keep it to that, we've got to change almost every single industry and the way that we operate. So it presents us with, sometimes that's like, oh my God, how are we going to get there? But I also know it gives us a lot of opportunity to do things differently, and that's what gets me excited. So how are we thinking about that opportunity? I look at it as, let's start with intangible assets. So we're talking about kind of patents, copyright, all of the knowledge work that are done by companies. If you go back to 1975 and look at the S&P 500, so that's the kind of top 500 public companies in North America and how they operate. In 1975, those companies, the top 5 were industrial giants, global energy companies. They were IBM, Procter & Gamble, Exxon, the oil company, General Electric, 3M. These were heavy property companies, physical, tangible assets, and their valuations were based on their tangible assets. 90% of their valuation was based on tangible assets. Okay, fast forward. Now what are our top companies? Alphabet, which is Google, Amazon, Apple. Apple's usually number 1. Now we're thinking differently. Okay, it's not their tangible, it's their intangible assets. But we keep, in our business, insuring, lending, creating financial products based on tangible assets. So we have now had this historic rotation in value to intangible assets, where 90% of the value of the of the S&P 500 is intangible assets. So what are we doing about it? What we've been doing about it is thinking, how do we actually value those assets? You can value them when a company sells, but that's not necessarily what whatever company wants to do in order to value them. And we want to be able to use our assets in order as collateral so that we can get loans against them so we can grow. That's how businesses grow. So, okay, how do we do that? So we're now working with, at Aon, we've actually bought a law firm, 601 West, and created a technology that can map and value intangible assets, created a system in which they can be used as collateral and can now be used for loans, which we also help facilitate as necessary. Changing the whole thought process around how those companies can operate, how they can grow, and where in the world they can grow. Excuse me. The potential for this funding mechanism is massive. So IP represents $20 trillion inside the S&P 500 alone. And now we can use that differently. So as we're talking about intangible assets, excuse me, think about the metaverse. I think everybody's heard of it. There's probably half of you that know what it is and half of you that don't, which is completely fair. If you don't know what it is, it's a blending of your virtual and physical worlds. And I actually listened to something recently I'll share with you because I think it's really cool. When people are participating in the virtual world as their business selves, so when I show up to do a speaking engagement like this with you, I dress like this, I look like this, my avatar, which is my me inside that world, looks like me. Great. Or a very conservative version of me. When I go into that world in my social world, I'm wearing a purple shirt, I've got stripes, sometimes I'm half animal. Part of me is a lion, part of me is an eagle, I might have red hair, I might have a bun, I do all kinds of crazy things. So it's interesting how we're showing up in our social lives in the metaverse is kind of the like, who do I want to be today? And in our business lives, it's, I know who I need to be today in order to do this part of my job. I just think that's kind of cool. We're also thinking about, like, what are the use cases for the metaverse? I bring up metaverse, by the way, because this is kind of the baseline of intangible assets is the metaverse. It's built of that. So here's a good example. Like, why do I need to do this? Yes, it's gaming. That's fun. But what if you're someone who needs to learn how to fix a helicopter? Wouldn't it be helpful if you can go into the metaverse, learn all the pieces and parts, figure out how to do it, practice on it, then go into the real world and do it? When we may or may not do it right, by the way, I think when you're in a helicopter, you're hoping that the repair person does it right. Let's practice in the metaverse, get really good at it, walk around it, touch it, feel it, get in there, and then do it in the real world. What if you did that for medical students? No practicing on people. Seems like it makes sense. Any kind of training that we would be doing in person, we could be doing this event in the metaverse where you're sitting and watching me, or we're interacting. Super opportunities there. So let's also talk about new mobility. So you've heard about intangible assets. That's a gigantic area of transition. Another new area of transition, this is my backyard, so I've spent a good part of my time starting with the Uber experience in new mobility. So the trends that are happening there are around connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, shared rides, shared vehicles, and electrification. These are global trends and really changing the way that we consume mobility, how we get from one place to another, how we're thinking about it. We're not buying as many cars as we bought before. We don't need to because we have other forms of reliable transportation that we can count on. We're also asking more of our transportation companies and asking them to be electric, where 22% of vehicles will be electric in the next 3 years or so. And that transition will continue to happen as combustion engine vehicles, if the life of a vehicle is 12 to 15 years, we need to kind of run that out. But we'll start to see more and more electric vehicles. And we'll talk about environmental issues in just a second. As we move to this transition around electric vehicles, we're asking for that as consumers, in part because of the climate impact. So these trends, these macroeconomic trends mix together. When you're looking at autonomous vehicles, I live in the city of San Francisco in California, and we have autonomous vehicles that you can take a taxi ride in. So no drivers whatsoever, or what they call safety engineers, inside the vehicle. It's really an interesting experience. And we're talking about a $250 billion industry each year just for the ride sharing. So we have these new ways of thinking about how we're interchanging with our mobility and what that means for how we as businesses need to support that. As I shared in my original story, we need more flexibility. Customers are asking for an on-demand environment. If you think about the insurance behind those programs, we created a product that's usage-based insurance. So whereas if you think about your own auto policy, you're probably paying for every 6 months, maybe once per month, or something to that effect, no matter how much you drive it. Now we pay per mile, or you can create contextual insurance, so you pay per mile, different if it's raining, different if it's not, different if it's during the day, different if it's middle of the night, because we know that there's changes there. So we're trying to innovate around how the world is changing in response to these macroeconomic trends. Social change. So we talked about the work from home already. Massive social change happening right now. I don't know if you know the term ESG, environmental social governance. 5 years ago, if I asked each of you to read the ESG report of a company that you were doing business, you'd say, why do I need to read that? Is that important? Do they have one? Maybe it wasn't important because nobody was paying attention to it then. Today, every time I go into a client, if I do nothing else before I go in, I read their ESG report. You have to know how they're thinking about this. It's changing the business strategy, and in return, that transition to thinking differently about societal expectations, whether that's climate change or people, inclusivity, is changing the way that we're doing business. So Aon has a program through Chicago, which is in Illinois in the United States, Chicago Tech, called a Sprinternship program. And the goal is to work with women and non-binary students in tech over a short period of time to create something new for the marketplace. And we created an algorithm that predicts race, gender, and ethnicity of investors in a profile. The goal of that is to create awareness, accountability, transparency in investor profiles where we as consumers are asking, whether it's a portfolio of business or otherwise, to step up and say, you need to be a better citizen in the world, and I'm paying attention. But how can I get that information? These algorithms can help. Excuse me. We're also working around delivering this transition of climate, right? So we want to be a net zero carbon emitter world. It's a big ask, right? Because everything that we're doing today is building toward using more carbon. Now we're asking, not only can you not build, but you actually kind of have to reverse course. So this is a big deal. It also means we have to think differently about jobs. So wind turbine technicians are the fastest growing job category in the United States. But that wasn't true 5 years ago. We also need solar panel installers. We need energy consultants. We need chemists and geologists in a number far different than we had before. We're in the middle right now of hiring 12 climate specialists onto my team for our climate initiative, just to get smart in the space. They don't even have to know anything about insurance and brokerage. We just need to get smart in the space. And what does this mean? This means that we need to collaborate more closely together. And so when we think about each of those industries, whether it was the intangible assets leading into the metaverse, whether we're thinking about new mobility and what that brings to each of us, now we're talking about the climate and social change, you can see how they all fit together, right? How are we going to behave in the metaverse? That's going to impact our social change. How are we interacting with our new mobility models, and what are we asking for them? How are we working in e-commerce and bringing that together? And what do we need to bring to the table for us as a brokerage partner amidst all of this disruption? Now that I've used the word disruption, I'll give you one more thought. I used to go to a conference called InsurTech Connect, and it was all around InsurTech, so technology business focusing on the insurance industries. It was called the disruption. Always that was the word that was used. I was going to say last year. It wasn't last year. It was 2019. It just feels like last year because we lost a couple years. But a couple years ago when we went, we talked about ecosystems. Because what we've learned is that if we work together, there's a special something these technology businesses can bring to the table that my firm might not be able to bring. There's an understanding of the business globally that my firm brings to the table that the technology companies do not bring. But when we put them together as an ecosystem, we can do more together than we can separately. A good example of that, for those of you who know PayPal, we're now working with PayPal so that we can take payments for our smaller clients through the PayPal platform. And through the PayPal platform, where there's 34 million small businesses, they can also get reduced cost insurance programs. So when we're working together, we can solve some of these issues that they face so much better than when we're working alone. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. Thank you.